o'clock in the Pacific. A number of states have still got polls open. Lots of things for you to vote on there, including the presidential race. We were talking in the last half hour about the state of Minnesota. We have not projected a presidential winner in the state of Minnesota. Mr. Mondale, at the moment, has a very slight lead. But we are, quite frankly, with 2% of the precincts coming in, saying that is presently too close to call, even though in that popular vote it looks like more than a slight lead, 57% to 43%. David?
Now, Mr. Reagan, no doubt, is very happy with his electoral vote, and no doubt very happy with the fact he's been reelected by a substantial margin. But he must be extremely concerned, any president must be, about the makeup of the House of Representatives, which is now dominated by the Democrats. And Mr. Reagan looks forward to some improvement in the House. How much he will get, we don't know yet. Charlie Gibson, who covers it all the time, is there. Charlie, what do you see happening? How much can you tell at this hour?
Well, you can't tell anything definitive, but I was interested to hear Jack Kemp say in your last half hour that he now expects more than a 20-seat pickup for the Republicans in the House, and I think it's too early to say that. We have an overwhelming Reagan victory in so many states, but as of now, we only show a pickup by the Republicans of 5 seats. There are plenty of districts to go, but at the moment, only 5-seat pickup, and there are a couple of notable ones we should mention. In the 11th District of New Jersey, Dean Gallo has defeated a 22-year veteran of the House, Joe Minish. Joe Minish really got redistricted into a bad area, and he has lost rather heavily. That is one of the pickups for the Republicans. Another one in the 5th District of Connecticut, where Bill Ratchford, a very popular Democrat around here, has lost to a very young man, Jim Rowland, from a long political family in the state of Connecticut. But there are a couple of other pickups. David mentioned earlier that Bob Smith race in New Hampshire. Dudley has lost in that race. Smith has won it, and in North Carolina, William Colby, the former athletic director in North Carolina, has won against a Democrat. But there are a number of seats that we've been watching that the the Democrats are holding, seats that the Republicans had hoped to pick up. In Virginia 6, for instance, the Republicans had high hopes for this one. The Democrats have held it. Also in the at-large seat in Delaware, the Republicans had hopes with at least DuPont running. You don't bet against a DuPont in Delaware, but nonetheless, a DuPont there has lost to Carper. In Ohio 9, again, the Republicans had some hopes. They didn't win there. And one more that we should mention is in Connecticut 3, where the Republicans with Larry DeNardis had hoped to beat Bruce Morrison, and they did not. The point being here, the Republicans, yes, are making gains, but no, they are not making the gains of the size they had hoped. There are plenty of other critical states that we're watching, North Carolina, Texas, etc. As I say, presently a pickup of 5 for the Republicans. There will be more, but whether they get over that 20 level that Jack Kemp mentioned, it is questionable at this time. Gentlemen?
Charlie, I don't want to throw any man a curve who's got to keep his hands on 435 races, but there is a race in Massachusetts, Illinois, and Idaho where congressmen who were censured by their colleagues are running for re-election. Can you tell me how they're doing?
Too early to call. In the 10th District of Massachusetts, Gary Studs, who was censured by the House for a homosexual relationship with a page 11 years ago, he is leading. Too early to call on the Illinois race or the Hansen race in Idaho. We'll let you know.
Doesn't like I threw him a curve. It looks like I set him up.
No, it looks as if you had rehearsed that.
Thanks.
Charlie, I congratulate you. 435 races, and he has them all at his fingertips.
We'll be back. We'll be back in just a moment.
This portion of the 84 vote is being brought to you by Ford and Lincoln Mercury Dealers and Manufacturers Hanover, the financial source worldwide.
We're Manufacturers Hanover, helping you grow wherever you are.
A silk importer departs from Los Angeles.
Backed by a letter of credit from our bank's international division.
A furniture manufacturer expands his inventory in Cleveland.
With our commercial corporation behind him.
The World Financial Center springs up in New York.
That's our bank's real estate division. They can handle almost anything.
We're Manufacturers Hanover.
And now you know why we're called the financial source worldwide.
Car repairs, guaranteed for life. Only participating Ford and Lincoln Mercury dealers guarantee thousands of repairs for as long as you own your car. You pay for a covered repair once, never again. Because the dealer who did the work will fix it free. Free parts, free labor for life.
No charge.
Terrific. The lifetime service guarantee, only from Ford and Lincoln Mercury dealers. We fix cars for keeps.
Oh, what Sylvania light bulbs go through.
before they come to you. As many as 38 tests in all. So that when you do this, your Sylvania light bulb will do this for an average of 1,000 hours. And isn't that the best test of all?
Do you have a cat box odor problem?
No. Yeah.
Then try new Fresh Step cat litter.
Fresh Step?
A whole new kind of cat litter. Fresh Step is the only litter activated by your cat's touch.
Wow.
Tiny odor controllers are released every time he scratches or steps.
So Fresh Step freshens with every step.
Right. Has Fresh Step controlled the odor problem?
Yeah. Yes.
New Fresh Step. It freshens with every step.
Thursday, Tony Geary's an ex-con trying to con his way back into his ex-girl's life.
I don't ever want to see him again.
I'm going to get a job. I'll be like normal.
And he's getting help from Billy D. Williams.
You gotta be kidding.
Tony Geary as the imposter at 8, 7 Central.
Thursday.
ABC News coverage of the 84 vote continues.
Good evening again. ABC News now has a projection to make in the Idaho Senate race, where we are projecting that Jim McClure, who is the Republican incumbent, has defeated his opponent Pete Bush, who was making his first try for elective office. ABC projecting Jim McClure, the incumbent Republican, in the Senate. It may be a small thing, David, but it's the small things that help. Jim McClure very much pleased his rural constituents this year. He got $440,000 to fight grasshopper infestation just towards the end of the last session of Congress.
Well, he also was a friend of and often an admirer of James Watt, stuck with him through thin and thin. Now, there are 10 women running for the Senate this year. One of them, we have already projected her as a winner, is Nancy Kassebaum, Republican of Kansas, who is standing by at this moment. Is that your headquarters there, Ms. Kassebaum? You in your headquarters there? The green?
No, I'm at the Mid-America Indian Center in Wichita.
All right. Well, wherever it is, we're happy to have you with us. Let me ask you, and you should be an authority on this subject. Was Ms. Ferraro on the Democratic ticket a hurt or a help? Politically, I mean, not philosophically. What do you think?
Well, I think it's too early to assess just exactly what impact she had. I would have to guess from comments I've heard that perhaps it's believed she has not been that much of an asset to the ticket. I frankly feel she ran a very hard and tough campaign and certainly did break a barrier.
Well, Senator, if you don't think she really did help, and you're a successful politician, one of not many women in the Senate, one of two, why do you think she didn't help?
I think it was a combination of factors for the Democratic ticket, and I think that the Mondale-Ferraro combination just was not one that was going to draw, and particularly where Mr. Mondale needed the South, it was just not an area that she seemed to be able to draw support from.
We kept hearing people say that Ms. Ferraro was a very attractive woman and very competent, and it's too bad she wasn't running with Ronald Reagan. I assume you would agree with that?
Well,
George Bush is not going to be upset, so...
Well, I just don't know how you weigh that out. Obviously, I think President Reagan was going to be elected no matter who was with him.
Well, from the returns we have so far, which I trust you have seen, he has made a clean sweep of every state that has at this hour closed its polls and which we have been able to project. And he's far ahead. Thank you very much, Ms. Kassebaum. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. ABC's Barry Sarafin keeps his hands on all our exit polls throughout the evening, and we were just noting a little while ago that at the moment, this is not a definitive final answer by any means, but at the moment, President Reagan is leading in Geraldine Ferraro's home district of Queens in New York City. So let us go to Barry Sarafin now and see what the women's vote and the vote for and or against women shapes up like tonight. Barry?
Well, Peter, first of all, the president continues to lead among both men and women tonight. Among men, 62% to 37%. Among women, 55% to 45%, a little less enthusiastic support among women. And in one state tonight, Geraldine Ferraro's home state of New York, there was a genuine gender gap. In this state, it was the president favored by men 56 to 44%, 43. And among women, however, they went for Walter Mondale, 55% to 45. In this state, the choice of a vice presidential candidate was deemed important by a number of voters. Nearly half of them said so, and among those voters, they favored Walter Mondale, 54% to 46. Even so, among Italians in New York, it was Ronald Reagan by more than 20 points. And among Catholic voters, and they were a huge part, nearly half of the electorate in New York, it was again Mr. Reagan favored by a big majority. We should point out that across the country so far, only 14% of the women that we've questioned say the choice of a woman as the vice presidential candidate was important in casting their vote today. Gentlemen?
Barry, thank you. I have a projection, one we have all been waiting for with some interest and curiosity. It is from Minnesota. We project that in Minnesota, Walter Mondale has won his home state, and the first state he has won this evening. It's fairly close. It should be remembered, by the way, that Mondale has not actually lived in Minnesota for about 20 years. He's lived in Washington. But nevertheless, it's his home state. He grew up there. And there you see the first blue state on the ABC News map. Minnesota for Mondale. Only 3 states on the mainland of the U.S., 48 states, left white because we haven't been able to project them yet because they're still voting. Peter?
You know, I was wondering, Barry, David, Barry Sarafin was telling us a little while ago that a great many people had made up their minds how they were going to vote long before tonight. Very different than it was in the primary campaigns. And as you were talking, I kept thinking about Walter Mondale's return to that giant rally he had in Minnesota the other day when somebody, I think, put on a Minnesota North Stars hockey shirt on him. He made a very emotional speech, not only to his staff, but to the people of the state, which created, at least on television, where so much of the campaign has been this year, a real sense of belonging in this state. I'm not sure what that vote reflects tonight, but it certainly is going to make him feel better than he must be feeling in terms of the total evening.
Well, yes. Otherwise, he may not have won a single state. And losing his own home state, as I say, even though he hasn't lived there in a long time, would certainly be embarrassing, as well as having other negative aspects.
You know, this coverage on our network, at least tonight, is being seen obviously around the country, but it's also being seen in various places overseas. At the American Embassy in London, for example, they're watching election coverage here, as people do, and stream in many overseas capitals. Every election night down, Americans as well as people who live in the countries themselves. And we often forget that when we elect a president of the United States, we're electing a president of the free world. And overseas people watch this vote just as closely and sometimes more closely than people in this country do. We want to go to London now, where ABC's Barry Dunsmore is standing by in our London bureau. Barry, let me ask you first. I see you're there with David Owen, who is a former Foreign Secretary. What the reaction is there and what Dr. Owen has to say.
Well, first of all, Peter, I think it is no surprise to the people in London that this has happened, but I will leave it to Dr. Owen to give us his thoughts on what it means to the British and perhaps the Europeans as well.
Well, we've expected it. There are no surprises. I think for most of us, we think this election has shifted the president's attitude to arms control and to the Soviet Union, and for all of us, for the better. Certainly since January, he's been speaking a language which we found much easier to live with, those of us who are firm supporters of NATO and strong on multilateral disarmament. What we hope now is he'll live up to it in his second term, that he'll carry a serious dialogue, a constructive dialogue with the Soviet Union. I think he'll get a response. I think Gromyko visiting him in the election was important. That's the way we'll judge him, above all, on the question of peace and whether he'll really live up to his electoral rhetoric.
Isn't there a fear, however, that indeed that was simply rhetoric? And I've heard you speak in other fora where you've suggested that there are certain dangers to this great landslide.
Well, yes. On the other hand, I personally think he will stick to it. I'm sticking my neck out. I think 86 we'll see some form of agreement. It's vitally important for us in Europe, but I think it's even more important for his own presidency. Second-term presidents look at the history books. And the way he will go down the history books is, has he delivered a peace? I think that is the fundamental issue. We also worry about the deficit and how you handle that deficit. And I personally think the least damaging way of handling the deficit for your economy and for the world economy, and particularly the third world with the debt problem, is if you are prepared to slow down the increase in your defense budget. Now, you're not going to do that unless you're into a serious dialogue and feeling reasonably optimistic of making progress with the Soviet Union. So you come back all the time to the question of an ordered relationship with the Soviet Union. That's what's been missing. It's been missing now ever since really Nixon left office. And the Europeans want to see the Soviet Union and the United States. We know you won't like each other. We don't expect you to. I don't want to either. What I want you to do is to have a relationship which has no risk attached to it, where the Soviets understand you and you understand the Soviet Union. And that's the real test for President Reagan. In the first 3 years of his administration, he was the recruiting sergeant for the unilateralists here in Europe, and I hope that will change now.
Dr. David Owen, thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Dr. Owen. I must say I'm pleased. I've many times tried to get Dr. Owen up at 3:15 in the morning, which it is now, and you succeeded. You succeeded, Barry, where I failed.
Do you blame him?
We want to, in just a minute, go across the English Channel and talk to Pierre Salinger in France, but we have a projection first to make that in the state of Iowa, we wish to make a projection in the Senate race where Tom Harkin, the Democrat, has upset Roger Jepsen, the incumbent. Now, that is a big upset in the state of Iowa for the Republican incumbent, Roger Jepsen. That was something that has been showing slightly in the polls before Election Day. They had very much of a neck-and-neck race, but that is a big setback for the Iowans. Though, if I recall, Iowans haven't sent an incumbent back to Washington in some years. Am I right?
They seem to have an unofficial 6-year rule. You serve 6 years and you're out. Not a bad rule, in my opinion.
Not too keen on Washington. Yeah. We'll be back in just a moment.
MasterCard, I'm bored. Interest is piqued. MasterCard, I'd follow you anywhere.
Chrysler creates a more powerful laser because the competition is always on our tail, and we intend to keep them there. We boosted turbo power. 0 to 50 Laser XE is faster than Toyota Supra. Front-wheel drive laser beats Camaro's E28 in the slalom. And Laser XE has advanced electronics, marked cross leather available, and the Chrysler protection plan. Laser XE. The competition is good. We had to be better. Chrysler, the best built, best backed American cars.
We want to make a projection now in the Nebraska Senate race, where ABC News now projects that the incumbent Democrat, James Exon, has defeated his opponent, Nancy Hawk. James Exon, who is a former popular governor. Nancy Hawk was one of the 10 women running for the Senate tonight. She is a member of the University of Nebraska Board of Regents. There is no change there. James Exon, the incumbent, returned to the Senate by our projection. David, the governor?
We have two projections from 2 states for governors in the governor's elections. First in Montana. I think I have it right. Is Montana first? Yes.
Yep.
We project the election of Ted Schwinden, who is the incumbent, re-election, who is a Democrat, governor of Montana. And in Utah, Norman Bangerter. He is a state representative, Republican, and we project him to be the winner in the race for governor in Utah.
That is an open race there, so that is a gain for the Republicans because, as I recall, Governor Matheson is retiring or could not succeed himself. I think he decided to retire, and so that is a gain for the Republicans there.
He's been governor quite a long time, and he didn't have to retire. In the West, they're not so tough about saying a governor can only have 1 term or 2 terms. That happened in the East when they were still trying to punish King George III by limiting our governors to 1 term or 2 terms. Anyway, we're not going to Paris, I gather, because something is not working, but we will try it again shortly.
Can we take a quick look, just a very quick look at the popular vote for it? 30% of the national vote is now reported in from around the country, and Mr. Reagan is getting about 59% of it, a little more than 16, almost 16.5 million votes. Mr. Mondale getting 11.5 million votes, 41% of the vote, with 30% of the precincts reporting in from around the country.
We will go to Paris in about 10 minutes, I'm told. Just after 10:30 Eastern Time, we'll hear from Pierre Salinger and whatever he has to say about the French reaction to the American election.
It is perfectly true what I said. I mean, it's going on at the British Embassy and others, but all over the rest of the world, people follow these election results as closely as we do. I've had to follow them from some of the strangest places in the world, and they're not very hard to get because the Voice of America and other things pushes them up. At any rate, that is our national election picture at 22 minutes past the hour.
The 84 Vote, 5 Alive News election returns, brought to you by Frontier Federal Savings and Loan. The frontier spirit lives in Oklahoma.
The voter turnout was heavy today in Oklahoma, and tonight the apparent result is a big win in Oklahoma for Oklahoma's 8 electoral votes for Ronald Reagan. Good evening, I'm Jack Bowen.
And I'm Jerry Harris, and we're going to take a look at some of those results right now, starting with the presidential race in Oklahoma, with 43% of the precincts in now, almost half the voting power in. President Reagan over Walter Mondale, 70% to 30% at this point.
Take a look now at the Corporation Commission race in Oklahoma with 9% of the precincts reporting in. As you can see, this one's too close to call with incumbent Jim Townsend right now with 50% of the vote and also 50% for Tom Gill. Just a few votes ahead is Jim Townsend. In the U.S. Senate race, 43% of the precincts reporting in. A big win in this one. David Boren already projected the winner with a large portion of the votes.
Of course, in the congressional races, the 1st District has been the hottest one and the closest one. And if you take a look at your screen right now, you will see that Jim Jones and Frank Keating are neck and neck at this point, even 50% each.
That's been a big race that the Republicans have wanted, obviously, to take away from Jim Jones, a Democrat. We have Ramona Russ with a report from Congressman Jones' watch party in Tulsa.
Well, Jerry and Jack, I'm here at the William Plaza Hotel where the watch party is being held for Congressman Jim Jones. And as you can see, people are standing around watching the numbers come down. And it's been pretty intense because the first numbers that came down, Jones was behind, basically 55 to 45, and now it's getting a little bit closer. With me now is Debbie Branch, and she's been a long-time volunteer with the Jones campaign. And tell me, what are you feeling right now? What do you think is happening?
Well, I think that the initial returns that we saw coming in were from the Southside precincts where Mr. Keating was expected to do well. And I think that the returns that are coming in now are from the more traditional Democratic precincts where Congressman Jones is expected to do well. I understand from the campaign that they are very comfortable about the congressman's chances here tonight and are very optimistic about the results.
Okay, are you worried about the landslide effect at all, Annie?
I think it's of concern to the campaign because obviously a lot of the races back east, I think it's evident that there has been some impact on those races, and I think they're concerned here for that reason too. But I think the last week there were a lot of polls done, and I think that the congressman showed his ability to withstand the slippage, and I think that they're still confident that he'll do that here tonight.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. Back to you, Jerry and Jack.
Thank you, Ramona. Now we're going to check in at the Keating headquarters for a report on how things are going there.
I'm Jane Braden with the Keating campaign in Tulsa. Early returns here had this Republican audience ecstatic and their candidate promising a big win. Republican candidate Frank Keating is defying the polls by taking an early lead in this race against incumbent Jim Jones. The only explanation here is that undefined bonus called the Reagan coattail effect.
Well, I would certainly hope they would. The president is overwhelmingly reelected.
that means there's something right about not only him as a person, but his programs. And I would assume that the people want those programs implemented. Let's give them a chance. If they succeed, great. If they don't succeed, then they can toss all of us out. But I'm absolutely confident that they're going to succeed.
How long will the Reagan momentum carry Keating? That's the unanswered question tonight. And is that momentum strong enough to carry him across the finish line with a victory? From Tulsa, Jane Braden, 5 Alive News.
Okay, and Jane, now we're going to go even further east than Tulsa. Let's go to Washington, D.C. for a report from our bureau there, and Tracy Lyons. Tracy, what's the mood in Washington tonight?
Well, Jack and Jerry, as you can imagine, the mood in official Washington is quite jubilant. Official Washington likes nothing better than a vote of confidence, and this presidential election is telling them that the American voting public likes what they've been doing and wants to see even more. There are private parties all over town. The Republican Party is everyone's swinging and drinking and having a great time, and at the Democratic Party, they're having a good time as well. I think they're glad that it's over, and they're starting to look forward to 1988.
Thank you, Tracy. We have a few more congressional races to check in on now. Picking up with the 2nd Congressional District with 29% of the precincts reporting in. It is Sinar over Rice, 72% to 28% of the vote. And now going on to the 3rd District with 49% of the precincts reporting in. Wes Watkins, victorious over Patrick Miller, 81% of the vote. And in the 4th District, McCurdy over Smith, 64% to 36% of the vote.
Congressional District 5, there you see Mickey Edwards, the incumbent, with 77% of the vote, to Greason's 39%, and as you see, 46% of the precincts reporting in. And in Congressional District 6, Glenn English with the lead, and we'll be back with more after this.
Times change. Places do too. Oklahoma sure has. It's come up strong, solid, and so have we. We're Frontier Federal Savings. We've worked and grown all across Oklahoma, helping folks save and build, and a whole lot more. We're proud of what we've done together. Truth is, our strengths always come from the people. That's the Frontier spirit. It lives in Oklahoma.
Of course, the 2 races that we really have an eye on tonight are those in Congressional District 1, as you've seen, Jim Jones and Frank Keating running neck and neck.
50-50.
And the same thing, basically, in that corporation commissioner race with Jim Townsend and Tom Gill. So,
of course, we'll have a complete report tonight at 10 on 5 Alive News.
We'll see you then.
There's no substitute for quality when it comes to banking service. When it comes to banking in Norman, there's no substitute for security. Security National Bank and Trust Company, member FDIC.
I think jarred baby food is just fine. But when it ends up in here, some of it goes to waste. That's why I like the wholesome goodness of new Heinz Instant. It has the natural flavor Stevie likes. You can't buy a more nutritious baby food. No added salt, sugar, or preservatives. So now I can make a little or a lot. Make it thick or thin. And there's never any waste.
Introducing Heinz Instant Baby Food. None of its goodness goes to waste.
All gone.
In Oklahoma City, this is KOCO TV 5. ABC News coverage of the 84 vote continues. From ABC News election headquarters in New York, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
Welcome back. It is 10:30 in the east. It is 7:30 on the west coast. We have a projection to make in the Montana Senate. Max Baucus, who is the incumbent Democrat, according to our projections, has defeated Chuck Cousins. Max Baucus, who is one of those people who walked across much of his state soliciting votes, was called by his opponent, Charles Cousins, a wimp. It didn't appear to work. We also want to remind you that out on the West Coast, you still have ample time to vote out there. It's only 7:30 in California, Oregon, and Washington State. There are still a lot of local races, and there are still some propositions. If you're in California, for example, you have an opportunity to go and vote on a proposition which would strengthen the famous Proposition 13 by further reducing property taxes. You also have an opportunity in California to vote on a proposition as to whether or not the state should issue a $50 million bond to fund centers for senior citizens. So your vote in California is still very important.
They have a chance to vote against Howard Jarvis or for him. either way.
That's absolutely perfectly correct. The creator of Proposition 13. We now want to go, before he, in all fairness, falls asleep at the wheel, to Pierre Salinger in Paris, where it is, what, Pierre, almost 4 o'clock in the morning. We've talked to Britain, and we'd like to know what your reading is from France at this point.
Well, Peter, I'm at the Paris Opera, where tonight there was a glittering party around the American election sponsored by the French magazine Paris Match. They had what you call the two Paris, actors, politicians. And when it was announced here that Ronald Reagan had won, a wave of applause went through the crowd. Then everybody went home and went to bed. And I stayed here waiting for you. But the applause was totally linked to a poll which was published in the French newspaper Le Monde today, and which showed if the French could have voted in the American election, they would have voted for Ronald Reagan. However, they also said that while they would have voted for Ronald Reagan, they did not want Reaganomics applied to France. One of the most interesting aspects of that poll is the rise in the number of French who believe that the United States would now come to the aid of Europe if it was invaded by the Soviet Union since Ronald Reagan came to power. That figure has gone up dramatically in France, and I think it's probably one of the accomplishments that Ronald Reagan has had overseas.
Pierre, is that why they say they would vote for him? Were they able to vote because of
yes,
that?
I think that's the principal theme, because if you analyze the poll, you see that they're opposed to our policies in Central America. They're opposed to our policies in the Middle East. They're even about on the idea of the deployment of missiles, but they are strongly in favor of Ronald Reagan's policies vis-a-vis the Soviet Union.
Pierre, you've just come back from India and the funeral of Mrs. Gandhi. And one of the concerns that Mrs. Gandhi expressed just before she died was about superpower confrontation and competition on the subcontinent. Did you get any sense while you were in New Delhi of how the Indians and the Pakistanis might feel about a second Reagan term?
Well, I did, really, to be honest with you, I did not get into much of Ronald Reagan while I was in India. You know that Mrs. Gandhi had kind of tilted her government in the last 2 years toward the Soviet Union and against the United States. She was not on very friendly terms with the United States. And one of the questions that's being posed now is that whether Rajiv Gandhi is going to change that tilt now that he's in power.
Pierre, thank you very much for joining us. Hate to keep you up so late, but much more important in your case, hate to make you miss a party. Thanks very much for joining us.
If he didn't miss one at the Paris Opera, it looks quite beautiful.
I think he's been standing upstairs, though, while it's all been going on downstairs.
Let's see. We have some races that have not yet been called, and for two reasons. One, they're too close to call. We can't tell yet who won. And the other reason is that some of the polls in the West are still open. We do have now a projection from North Dakota in the race for governor. And our projection is that State Representative George Sinner, the Democrat, has won the race for governor in North Dakota.
That's an upset.
Yes.
Alan Olson.
Alan Olson is the incumbent. He was a Republican. The Democrats have picked up a net gain of 1 in the governors in North Dakota. Now, there are some others we have not yet called, and for these reasons. In Washington, because the polls are still open. In West Virginia, because it's too close. And in Vermont, because it's too close.
We also haven't called Illinois. And we haven't, did you mention Montana and Oregon?
Well, I was talking about governor.
I'm sorry, talking about Senator. We also haven't called the senator's race in Illinois, Alaska, Montana, and Oregon. Let us, however, try to bring you up to date as to what Senate races we have projected throughout the evening and simply look at a list of them. I'm getting an altogether different instruction, so why don't you go ahead and tell me. Okie dokie. That's good. The roundup of the Senate from the man who covers the Senate. Sandy Van Ocker in Washington.
Thank you, Peter. As of now, the Republicans have lost 1 seat in the Senate. There's been a net loss of 1. The Democrats have made a net gain of 1. The Republicans picked up the seat in, Kentucky, Dee Huddleston's seat. Democrats have picked up the Republican seat in Tennessee, vacated by Howard Baker. The net plus comes from Iowa, where Tom Harkin, the congressman, has defeated the incumbent Senator Roger Jepsen. But the seat that we're all waiting for, not just because it'll fundamentally alter the power structure in the Senate in terms of numerical advantage, is the seat in Illinois, where Charles Percy is seeking his 4th term, and right now he's running behind Congressman Paul Simon. Now, what's important about this is if Percy loses, then the man who becomes next entitled to be Senate Foreign Relations Chairman is Jesse Helms of North Carolina, who won re-election tonight. He's presently the chairman of Agriculture. He has said he'll stay as chairman of agriculture. The people I talked to yesterday in North Carolina, people on the Republican side of the aisle I talked to today in the Senate say he will become chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. Why? The chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee has had not really much influence since Walter George defeated the Bricker Amendment in 1954. Bill Fulbright was the chairman, he lost. Frank Church was the chairman, he lost. Clifford Case was the ranking member from New Jersey, he lost. And then Jacob Javits was a member on the Republican side, and he lost. Why does Jesse Helms want to do this? One, his supporters want him to do this. Secondly, it's my belief that he wants to do it because I think he wants to run for president in 1988. At the Detroit Convention in 1980, he was being pushed to run for vice president, and he might. Now, Jesse Helms, as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, will be in a powerful position to do a powerful lot in the next 4 years, especially if Robert Dole is seeking the presidency and Robert Dole succeeds in becoming majority leader of the Senate. Jesse Helms tonight is sitting in the catbird seat. Whether or not he takes the Foreign Relations chairmanship, if he does, if Percy loses in Illinois, he is a very powerful man in this country for the next 4 years.
Sandy, thank you very much indeed. In just a couple of minutes, we are going to talk to one of the men who has tried very hard to unseat Senator Percy in Illinois, Richard Viguerie, who, among other things, is the mailgram, even though he's a Republican, and who is the mailgram king of politics in this country. Let us, however, first take a quick look at the popular vote, with 35% of the precincts reporting in from around the country. Mr. Reagan is getting 59% of the vote with 18 million. Mr. Mondale is getting 13 million, about 41%, and someone has just handed me a card which says the turnout is about the same as in 1980, about 52.6% of the voting age population. It is up slightly in the Northeast, and it is up slightly in the West, and it is down slightly in the South and down slightly in the Midwest. We'll be back in just a moment.
It started in 1933 with our first electric. Then came typing that looked like printing. The revolutionary Selectric. And Selectrics that correct mistakes. 1984, IBM introduces the Selectric System 2000, the Wheelwriter typewriters and the Quietwriter typewriter. A new generation of typewriters from the company that makes the typewriters secretaries prefer most.
Car repairs, guaranteed for life. Only participating Ford and Lincoln Mercury dealers guarantee thousands of repairs for as long as you own your car. You pay for a covered repair once, never again. Because the dealer who did the work will fix it free. Free parts, free labor for life.
No charge.
Terrific. The lifetime service guarantee, only from Ford and Lincoln Mercury dealers. We fix cars for keeps.
Whether you know it or not, when you burn the candle at both ends, that's stress. And physical stress can rob you of certain vitamins. Stress tabs give you a complete formula of vitamins stress can rob and the body can't store, including biotin, 600 milligrams of C, plus vitamin E. If stress has you burning the candle at both ends, support your diet with stress tabs. Because physical stress can rob you of vitamins.
Sunday, Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor are going up the river.
Give me a light.
But they're in over their heads.
Light.
They're stir crazy. Parental discretion is advised.
That's right, we're bad.
Then Steve Allen's back.
Hello.
With John Ritter, Burt Reynolds, Henry Winkler, Madeline Kahn, and more for an all-new Life's Most Embarrassing Moments. All starting at 8, 7 Central.
Sunday.
ABC News coverage of the 84 vote continues from ABC News election headquarters in New York.
We're back, and the numbers you have just seen there tell the story of what has happened in the Electoral College, the electoral votes so far tonight. 13 for Mondale, 454 for Reagan. Now we're going to switch to Falls Church, Virginia, I think, but I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, and talk to Richard Viguerie, who is editor of the Conservative Digest, who is active in conservative Republican circles, and whose views on what has happened tonight should be interesting. Dick, are they interesting?
They are indeed, David. This is probably not
quite as exciting as 1980, not quite as much tension because the presidential election was probably foregone conclusion many months ago. But this is a historic thing. I think for 2 elections in a row now, the conservatives have won solidly, 49 states or so. And I think something is happening in the country since 1966. The liberals have been suffering defeat after defeat. 18 years now, there's been an anti-liberal trend. I think that the Democratic Party is in serious trouble as long as they keep this leftward direction, and the Republicans could be looking at becoming the majority party.
Mr. Vigor, if you put it in party terms, I think you understand what you're saying. But if we look at our exit polls tonight, 43% only of the voters who've been out and cast votes today have described themselves as conservatives. Doesn't that make it less than the conservative victory you're describing?
Well, we can look at it a number of ways, Peter. Can you imagine if for 2 elections in a row, if the conservatives had won 4 years ago 6 states, and today if they'd won 1 state, I think there'd be a lot of people on the airwaves talking about the death of the conservative movement in this country. And I think that, you can play a lot of games with the polls. You can ask the questions a lot of different ways. We've heard a lot about how people really didn't agree with Ronald Reagan on the issues. They agreed with Walter Mondale on the issues, but they were voting for Ronald Reagan because of his personality. I think that's selling the American voters a little short. I think they understood quite well that Mondale was a liberal and Reagan was a conservative, and that's why they gave the president this landslide.
Now, let me ask you something about yourself and the conservative movement generally. In the Illinois election of a senator, Charles Percy is the Republican, and Paul Simon is a Democrat. I have seen you quoted as saying the party and the country would be better off if Simon won, because you don't like Percy's views.
Exactly, David. Nothing
isn't
personal.
That spinning it out a little thin?
Well, for many years, the conservatives have been very disillusioned with Chuck Percy's voting record, with his every election coming along and saying, well, I've learned my lesson, I've reformed, I'm going to vote different. And then he goes back to his liberal ways, and I think it finally caught up with him. And David was a very powerful influence on the president, I'm afraid, in foreign policy. He trashed most of the conservative nominees when they came before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It was very difficult to get a conservative confirmed through his committee. And if he's not chairman of that committee, it's going to make it a lot easier to get conservatives into the foreign policy area.
Could I possibly solicit a one-word answer from you? If Senator Percy loses, will Senator Helms automatically take the chairmanship of the Foreign Relations Committee?
That's up to Senator Helms. He's said he's going to stay as chairman of Agriculture. I take him at his word.
Thank you very much for joining us, Richard Vigory, editor of the Conservative Digest. What has been shaping up this evening is this battle for the House. So let's go down to Washington now to Charles Gibson for an update on the shape of the House battle this evening, Charlie.
Peter, I want to say right off that I am not going to be bronzed at the end of the evening and be one of these statues. I just so that you can tell me from the statues, that's all. Peter, at the moment, it is too early to make any kind of projection on what's going to happen in the House in terms of final numbers. There are about 25 races at the moment that are frankly just up in the air, and you can't do that. I think it is safe to say at this point that in 1982, you'll recall, the Republicans lost 26 seats to the Democrats, and I think it is now safe to say they are not going to gain 26 seats back tonight. But anything more than that is impossible to say. At the moment, we have the Republicans showing a gain of 6. The Republicans have picked up 6 from the Democrats. They have not lost any. I will quickly run through the seats that the Republicans have picked up. The 5th District of Connecticut, the 1st District of New Hampshire, where Dudley lost to Bob Smith, North Carolina 4, where the former athletic director at the University of North Carolina beat Ike Andrews, Indiana 8, New Jersey 11, where a 22-year veteran Joe Minish lost, and in Texas, the 26th District of Texas, Tom Vandergriff, the former mayor of Arlington, Texas, has lost after 1 term in the House. But I think we're going to have, obviously, more seats going to the Republicans. I think Jack Kemp is premature in saying that, as I said earlier, that the Republicans are going to pick up more than 20. It looks like it'll be somewhere in that range, but way too early to make a final projection on the House. Gentlemen?
Charles,
all right, thank you. Now, inevitably, in the case of a victory as one-sided as this, Mr. Reagan has carried it so far. Some are still voting. Mr. Reagan has carried every state except Minnesota, Mondale's home state. A decisive, sweeping defeat for the Democratic ticket. Inevitably, the question then becomes what happens what happens to the Democratic Party, and we will explore that question before the evening is over as best we can. Now, Ann Compton is talking with Senator Percy of Illinois, who at the moment, I understand, is running a little behind. Is that right, in our figures? Anyway, Ann, come in.
No, we can't hear Ann Compton at the moment, but let us broach, if we will, this subject, which comes up every time any single party gets in trouble like this. What happens to the X party? And in this case, at the moment, happens to be the Democratic Party. Let's take an initial look at an assessment done by Jeff Greenfield.
Happy days are here again.
Time was when presidential election days were mostly happy days for Democrats, but not lately. The world's oldest enduring political party has fallen on hard times. It's not just that Democrats have lost 4 of the last 5 presidential elections, it's how they've been losing and even winning. In the last 40 years, only once, in 1964, has the Democrat won more than 50.1% of the popular vote. In that same period, Republicans have won 5 presidential landslides. What's gone wrong? Part of it is geography. You win the White House by winning states. In the last 5 elections, 23 states with 202 electoral votes this year have voted Republican every time. That's 3/4 of the votes needed to be elected president. And how many have gone Democratic every time? Only the District of Columbia. Democrats used to talk about the solid South. In the last 5 elections, the Democrats carried the South once with native son Jimmy Carter in 1976. In the big industrial states, Democrats used to pile up huge margins in the cities, but city populations have shrunk, the suburbs have grown, and suburban living, with property and school taxes, tends to make voters more Republican. And don't sell real issues short. From civil rights to Vietnam to busing and quotas, deep divisions have split apart what once was the Democratic coalition. White ethnic from black, hawk from dove, those who see government as a helping hand from those who see it as a tax taker. Democrats still control the House of Representatives. They have a fair shot at the Senate in 1986. They control more governorships than do the Republicans, and more Americans say they're Democrats. But at least in presidential election years, the facts suggest that the Democrats may have become a permanent minority party. Gentlemen?
Jeff, thank you. I might say here, everyone knows it, but I'll say it anyway, there are 5 states where people are still voting: California, Oregon, Alaska, Washington, and Hawaii. And all but Alaska will be closed in about 10 minutes. Alaska is open until midnight, our time.
Just to make another point about that, David, one of the reasons there's always been concern about this voting in the West is because President Carter in 1980 conceded before some of the polls were closed. Walter Mondale and Ronald Reagan have both said this evening that they are not going to make any speeches, period, until the polls are all closed on the West Coast.
Okay. Now, the question of what happens to the Democratic Party from this point onward, we're going to turn to our What Does It Mean department with Will, Wicker, and Walters, beginning with Walters. Barbara?
What it means, first of all, is isn't it convenient that all our names begin with W? At least we have alliteration if we don't have agreement. If the Democratic Party is indeed worn out, as young people seem to think it is, and they're going to be voting for a long time, and they now seem to be voting Republican, what happens to the Democratic Party?
Well, there are 2 Democratic parties and there are 2 Republican parties. We have the presidential competition. The Republicans have a heavy winning record in that since 1856, since our 2 parties began competing with one another. There's still many more elected officials in this country are Democrats than Republicans. A plurality of Americans still want to vote for the Democratic Party if the Democratic Party will make it easy. The problem is the 2 parties have been defined by 2 great events, both of which were, at the moment, defeats. The Goldwater defeat in 1964 nevertheless brought in people who seem to have been on the right side of history, the conservative movement. The 1972 McGovern takeover of the party filled the party apparatus with people who simply will not learn from what happened to them in 1972.
But where do they go from here? What do you think? We talk about polarization, black versus white vote. Gary Hart said you need new ideas. We don't seem to have new ideas with the Democrats. What are they going to do to get their act together in the presidential election?
Well, the first thing you have to realize, it seems to me, not to take too Pollyanna-ish a view here, is that the Democrats have faced Ronald Reagan for the last time. That's a plus. The first thing they need to do is to get themselves a television candidate like Ronald Reagan. Now, that may be difficult to do, but that's one of the first things they need. And I think a third thing that you need to remember is that between the next, no, it's not cynical, it's a practical fact of American political life today. And I think the third thing you need to remember is that before there's another presidential election, there's going to be 4 years of government in here. And if those 4 years of government are disastrous, as I think they may be on both domestic and foreign policy, why the Democrats might come roaring back. No one was saying that the Democrats were dead in 1982 when unemployment was up around 11%.
Is it simply that the Republicans, the country is to the right of center and the Democrats are to the left of center?
I think it's that simple, and I think if the Democrats listen to Tom Wicker, they're going to have create a Republican era, Tom. I mean, the idea that it's television.
To what I just said, they get a television candidate? Of course not.
So you don't think it's issues at all?
But to the extent that the Democrats buy the fantastically soothing doctrine that it's only the telegenic and cosmetic aspects of this, that they can go ahead and avoid the unaccustomed torture of thought, then they're in deep trouble.
George, I'm not saying that.
Tom, the presidential candidate in the history of this republic who got the most votes is Richard Nixon. A less telegenic person never existed. More people have voted for him than any other candidate because they agreed with him by and large on the issue.
George, I understand that, and that was, I would remind you, 12 years ago, however. All I'm saying is not that television is the only thing, but I'm saying that the way you project what you are and what people want to vote for is through television.
Yeah, but what are they? I mean, if indeed they used to feel,
well, of course,
especially if you were young,
I'm not arguing that point.
Yeah, but if I'm saying, what is the Democratic Party? If you used to feel that the Democratic Party was a party that was far-seeing, was the party of the people, was the party of youth, and now it just seems boring and worn out. What are they now? The party of what?
I'm not saying that that's not true, and I thought Jeff Greenfield's analysis was very sound. But I am saying that things can change very, very rapidly. They have changed very rapidly in the past. No one was making this analysis in 1982 when you had 11% unemployment. If you get 11% unemployment again in 1988, which is not impossible, high interest rates, other things of that kind, the Democrats will be right back in there without any further thought.
In most states of the Union, the two most popular politicians are the President of the United States, who's a Republican, and the governor, who's a Democrat. And that governor, who's a Democrat, is governing in many states under a constitutional requirement to balance the budget. He's a tight-fisted executive, and he is much more in tune with the country than the Washington Democratic Party.
If what Tom says, they need candidates who are sparkling on television, one of the things they have to learn is to talk fast, which is what I'm going to do now. We have to stop because I think that we have coming up an interview with Senator Percy. We'll go back now
Barbara,
to
we do indeed.
Peter.
But first, I have a quick projection. In West Virginia, we project the election of Governor Arch Moore, a Republican, moving in and replacing a Democrat. Now we're going to Chicago, and Ann Compton, who is talking to Senator Charles Percy. Ann?
David, indeed, it is too close to call here in Illinois. And Senator Percy, you heard Richard Viguerie a few moments ago. Has some of that conservative money that has been spent against your campaign, aside from the Democratic candidate that you're running against, done something? Is that why you are running so far behind President Reagan in this state?
I don't think we should detract from Paul Simon's 10 years in Congress. He was lieutenant governor, and he ran for governor. He's well known. But also, never in the history of Illinois have we had so much money pour in from outside the state. One individual spent $1,200,000 from Southern California to try to influence the Illinois vote.
You have been chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. Is that one of the disadvantages that has played? You have been accused of thinking more of Paris, France than Paris, Illinois. Is that one factor this year?
It's not really a factor. It's been used by every opponent in the primary and the general. But in Illinois, quite different from other states. We're very much international minded. 85% is the minimum poll that I've seen, indicating that being chairman of that committee in Illinois is an actual advantage for Illinois.
Senator Percy, let me interrupt you.
Why are you?
We both want to have that.
I'm afraid everybody in New York wants to ask you questions.
Some Southern Californians sent over $1 million into Illinois trying to defeat you. Who was it?
Michael Golan, a businessman who's made a great deal of money. And he's just as determined. He's a one-issue person. He's absolutely determined to demonstrate that he can, in a sense, buy the seat.
Well, Senator,
and defeat the incumbent.
Senator, you spent over $4 million, if I'm not mistaken. If you do win tonight, will it have been worth it?
Citizens for Percy have, of course.
Well, all right. Your campaign has spent $4 million. If you win tonight, will it have been worth it?
Certainly, the effort is worthwhile. I want to be part of the economic recovery program. I'm thrilled at the mandate people of the country have for President Reagan's reelection and George Bush. That mandate is important all over the world. It's going to mean a continuation of this economic policy, and arms control will move forward rapidly now, and I think peace will continue. I want to be a part of that, of course. But I think both Simon and myself have spent equal amounts. What we have in addition to that is this outside money that's come in, particularly from one individual.
Senator Percy, thank you very much for joining us.
And thank you.
We want to just do a quick wrap-up now as to where we are. Let us take first a quick look at the popular board. 39% of the precincts reporting in. Mr. Reagan has 58% of the popular vote. Mr. Mondale has 41%. On the electoral board, which is the real story of the evening, Mr. Reagan has 454, and Mr. Mondale has 13. By the way, the greatest number of electoral votes ever won was 523 by Franklin Roosevelt in 1936, and in the 1972 Richard Nixon landslide, he won 520. David?
Well, Reagan has 454 now, and California is still to come. Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, and Alaska. They're all still open, so we can't call them. In any case, we have seen a tremendous sweep. We have seen the beginning of the end of the Mondale voyage, which he describes as having been longer than Columbus's and having discovered less at the end of it.
We are going to go away for half an hour now for local news, but we do expect Walter Mondale may come out after 11 o'clock Eastern Time, which could be in about 2 or 3 minutes or any time there. If Mr. Mondale does come out, we are going to cut into the local news, or give you the opportunity to cut into your local news, to see Mr. Mondale come out and speak to his supporters. So we just want you to know with that. Other than that, we will be back with the concluding national results, particularly in the West Coast, at 11:30. Hope you'll join us then. Thank you for staying with us this far.
Thursday on 2020.
Was the right man convicted as the Atlanta murderer? Wayne Williams speaks out to Geraldo Rivera in an exclusive interview.
Are you the monster of Atlanta?
Plus, the mysteries of the full moon. From romance to murder, does it really affect our lives? Watch 2020 Thursday.
History in the making, tonight on 5 Alive News.
It's been a night of overwhelming election numbers. Numbers, some say, are of historic proportions. Good evening, I'm Jack Bowen.
And I'm Jerry Harris. It has been a night of few surprises as well. President Reagan, as predicted, carried the state of Oklahoma. And as expected, there seemed to be cross-party line voting as the dwindle-down theory tried to surface in some state and local races. Most political analysts tonight agree the election results hinge on the large voter turnout.
It may have been a record turnout for Oklahoma voters today, and state election officials were clearly not ready for it. Long lines at polling places greeted all but the earliest risers this morning. Lines at some places stretched around buildings, and voters had to wait up to 2.5 hours in some instances. At the Stonegate Elementary School in Oklahoma City, the crowd of voters forced school kids to get off their buses a block away from the building. And a parking shortage brought the police in to tow away cars. But some voters came prepared for the long wait. They brought chairs and books to help pass the time more comfortably. Election officials blame the overcrowding at the polls not just on the heavy turnout, but also on the 10 state questions Oklahomans had to consider.
Nevertheless, people did finally get to the polls.